Hey guys, today we're going to be breaking down this Scarab QD from Microtech. So this is on the second or third release, something like that. It's on the blade, I think. So try and get it so you guys can see. But it's from September of 2014. Man, the light is not cooperating with me today. Let me see if I can tap it to focus. There we go. There you go, 2014. So you can see serial number is 12086 on this one. So they've made quite a few of these. Break it down in a second, but it's the action's getting a little sticky. It needs some help. I've cut a bunch of tape with it and have neglected to clean it off. So definitely needs a little sprucing up, a little bit of cleaning. But anyway, I wanted to walk through a little bit about the design and things that I like and things that I don't like with it. So overall, I think this is one of the better, if not the best looking OTF that Microtech made around that time. The Ultratechs then I think were good looking. I don't have one out here right now as a reference, but that era was kind of the flat body. So instead of this like angled front, it was kind of this arc on the front of it. And those are a little bit narrower in the width direction. They're a little bit thinner in the height direction here. The blade is a little bit shorter as well. The thing that I really like about this knife the most is that we have, at least on the older ones, this front was contoured depending on what the blade style was. So if you look at old ones like in the 2003, 2004 range, if you had a double edge, it would be pointed, kind of like an arrowhead in the front, because the blade would be, or the tip of the blade would be centered right here. And this one, you can see is off-centered, and that's to match the blade. So I'll try and get it so you can see. Hopefully you can see the tip that's kind of hidden down in there. But the tip of the blade matches perfectly up with this. So I think one of the issues that I've had with OTFs is that you get a pretty bad handle to blade ratio. And doing something like that, I mean, cuts off a good amount of length of the overall knife, right? Because it doesn't feel like you've got this big mass right there, right? So it's 3/8 of an inch almost from here to here. So you've effectively cut off 3/8 of an inch off this corner and probably 1/8 of an inch off this corner. So it's saving a lot of room in your pocket. When it's sitting down in your pocket like this, this area isn't going to be as big of a deal because it's not going to be jagged in that corner there. So I think that's a really nice detail. I feel like not a ton of other OTF makers have a detail like that. The other thing about this is the inlays. So I really like the inlaid knives. This one I think is cool. The back over here, kind of where your pocket would press in, it's pretty worn down. So it may be time to consider replacing or doing aftermarket replacement inserts in this. But overall, I mean, I think it's a really good design for a knife, and that it's got some of like I won't call them old-timey, but some of the more historic Microtech features, right? So this, obviously, it's got the ports on the bottom, but you have this jimping on the sides. So this was in the original Ultratechs. They all had this kind of jimping on the side. So you get that here and here as well. So it's an interesting detail. This is one of my own buttons, but it's very similar, if not exactly the same, in kind of the curves and the form to the factory button. So it's a really nice, comfortable ramp, whether it's factory or whether it's mine. They're both very close. And this ramp is actually what I modeled most of my other buttons after, because I find this really, really comfortable. It doesn't really bite into your thumb, and it's not like the X buttons where it really pinches, right? Because if you have the X button, for me, this is a lot less comfortable. These arcs, I feel like, work a whole lot better, at least in my opinion. And then as far as the blade goes, it has a pretty high grind, which is nice. So a lot of the other OTFs, I'll say, typically have a grind that's either half or 2/3 the height of this. So the issue can be is when you have blade stock like this, and this is probably 1/8 inch, 128 or 126.5. So 1/8 inch, we'll call it, down to final grind. But the issue is if you have an 1/8 of an inch grind and your blade is only half an inch or less tall, or your bevel at least, you have this really, really steep point there. So the knife is going to suck at slicing. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but most of what I use my knives for is slicing stuff. So whether I'm breaking down boxes or if I'm slicing open tape or whatever it is. And a tip is going to do most of your work for tape, depending on how you like to slice that. But I'm breaking down boxes. I really want a nice high bevel, so that way I can slice through much easier. And maybe that's just my preference. Maybe you guys have different preferences, but that's what I've noticed at least. But otherwise, I mean, I think the inlays are really nice. I think the jimping on this is really nice. I think the size on this, for me at least, is perfect. I guess I'll show overall what our handle is here. So handle, not including the glass breaker, we're at about 4.7-ish. And that's hooked on the glass breaker a little bit, so probably more like 4.6. So for me, this is a really good handle size. That like 4.5 to 5 inch handle, I think, is really nice. And then blade length, you've got, let's see, for actual usable edge is like 3.4. So for me, that's about perfect, right? I really like either a 3-inch to 3.5 inch at the biggest for my typical carry knives. Smaller than that, I feel like it's pretty limited, mostly because the handles on knives that are smaller than 3 inches for me are just kind of unusable. And then blade wise, I like to have about a 3-inch blade at a minimum. That's just kind of personal preference though. I think the last thing I haven't mentioned yet, these have the flute or the fuller on the spine here, which is another really nice detail, right? So the thing that I like about a lot of the older Microtechs is they have nice details. You got the fuller on the top, and then you have the fuller on the spine, and then the backside, and then all of the inlay work is really nice, and you've got all these kind of multi-axis or multi-operation cuts on the side. So at least from a machining and design perspective, I think it's really interesting. And you can tell there's a lot of like thought and work and everything that went into it, which I appreciate. I feel like it's a little more lacking in the current designs for the most part. I understand that they're pivoting away from kind of the smaller batch production, and they're trying to get into huge numbers and getting into every store. But for me, I'd rather see the slightly higher quality with more machining and more features and more interesting things put into the design. And I'd personally rather see a lineup where it's 5, 6, 7 good, really good, like excellent knives that they've put a ton of time and effort into, than just pumping out whatever 15, 18, 20 different kinds of knives in every anodizing color in the world. For me, I don't find that very interesting. I know a lot of people like to get every individual brand new thing, and they want to get it in this color and that color. For me, I'd rather have a couple high quality things than have a million things that have been kind of skimped out on. I guess since I'm going through the breakdown here, I don't know if I have a spring underneath. I do. So anytime you disassemble one of these, first you want to knock the blade off track, and then you want to kind of open this like a book like that, and then drop the spring, because that's what you should do. So be careful with it. The spring will kind of go away and you'll lose it. So inside here, nothing crazy, right? It's all anodized aluminum, and pockets milled out for springs and spring carriages and everything. So you can see you've got individual grooves for each one of these springs. So the dual fuel, before the dual fuel was real, obviously this is harder to actuate than any of the dual fuel stuff because it's the standard switch length throw. The thing that really for the dual fuel does the job is having the longer actuation length. Makes it much easier to deploy. Nothing crazy on this though. I mean, it's nice that you have this kind of notch that indexes in between here and here, just so that way you're kind of solidifying everything. It's kind of what you've got to do if you want to maintain the visual look from the front. Now, spring carriage wise, I think if there's one, not even I think, there's one major flaw with this knife, and it's that you have this really, really, really thin area here where your button is doing all the work to deploy the blade back and forth, right? So just think like math-wise for a second. I know some of you might not be math geeks or engineers or whatever, but our like thinnest wall right there is about 80 thou, 81 thou. Let's see if I can really get in there. So, I mean, maybe 70. I probably could keep weaning this down and down, but I like 72 thou is thin, 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 you know? And it'd be one thing if you had full thickness in that area, but it's also cut down super thin, so 32 thou there. So like cross-sectional area wise, I don't know if I have a pencil out here, so you guys might not have to sit through my math lesson. Yeah, I don't think I have a pencil out here, but let's see. So 70 thou by 32 thou, so 70 times 30 is 220, 100. So it's carry with the decimal points, it'd be 0.02 square inches. So any pound that you apply here is going to be multiplied by, what is that, 50 at least for psi. So if your typical knife takes like 5 pounds of pressure to deploy, then you've got your 5 pounds of pressure times 50 is 250 psi or something like that just in this area. And then, like, looking at it from a materials perspective, that's probably fine. And I also may have dropped to 0, so it might be like 0.02 of a square inch. That could also be an option. But either way, I mean, it's a very small surface area, and these fail all the time. And at this point, the knife was in production 11 years ago. Microtech doesn't make the replacement parts for these anymore. So basically what I understand is if you break these, you're kind of out of luck, and you can try and make your own, or you can try and find one online. And I gotta tell you, I have no interest in making these parts because it's kind of inherent to the design of the knife how that has to be, which is unfortunate. So that's kind of an oversight there, right? Because you need, I believe, let's see. Actually, you know what? I think it's on this half. I was gonna say, I don't see any reason it needs to be like that on that half. But over here, you can see it notches in like this. So I mean, personally for me, I would have probably cut out that section right there, where it kind of notches together, because I don't see any reason for that, and that's gonna pretty significantly increase your surface area. It's just like that perplexes me. That seems like a pretty significant design oversight that they figured out once they had cut all the chassis, and it was like, oh, well, what's cheaper, remaking all the chassis or to cut a notch in our slider? And I feel like cutting the notch in the slider was the thing there. So that's kind of the major flaw that I have marked down for this knife. And I mean, I love it, and I'll keep carrying it and using it for as long as I can, but man, it's one of these days that is 100% going to break, which is unfortunate. So like any OTF, you pull the stop pin out, this will come right out. Blade wise, anything that's hidden, there's nothing really interesting going on here. This is the same as basically any other OTF. So if you've seen one OTF disassembly or reassembly, you've seen them all. And then milling wise in the chassis, just interesting feature down here is for your, no, maybe not. I was gonna say that you have these grooves going out to the drainage ports, but it doesn't really seem like they are. So I will take that back, and maybe I'm incorrect. Yeah, I'm incorrect about that. So I expected that to do something, but maybe not. Also, I just completely had that thing explode. So hopefully that was on camera. So you could see the whole spring chassis just fly off into the abyss. Luckily, it didn't go too far, and I was able to find the pieces. But overall, I mean, that's kind of all I've got for this knife. I really like it. I think it's a great knife. I think it's one of the best Microtech designs in my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people dislike it because the tape inlays might be a lot design-wise. Might be pretty boring knife otherwise because it's just an OTF, and there's so many of them. So it might be in your taste, it might not be, but that's the whole breakdown. I'm going to start putting it back together, and I'll keep rambling, but yeah, I mean, man, this spring chassis is unhappy today. What I was going to say is in the button down here, you can see I have two different grooves cut, and that is because another kind of issue with this knife is that you have individual slider types depending on if it's a dual edge or if it's a single edge, which is just kind of an annoying feature, I'll say. I don't really understand why you would want to make different sliders for different knife types. I forget exactly what the difference was, if it's just how centered this is or what the deal was. I think it might be, now that I'm thinking about this more critically and not just accepting it, I'm trying to be careful putting this on. I think it might be because you can't have this go quite so far forward with the dual edge, right? Because this is probably going to be a little bit lower down, so you need a different spring chassis, which is less than ideal. So this, you can see I've got two slots, and one of them is for the single edge and one's for the dual edge. So this one, hopefully I've got right. Pretty sure I've got right. Maybe not. Yeah, it feels like it might be right. What do you think? Yeah, I think that's right. We're gonna see. But if it doesn't work, then I can just take it back apart and use the other chassis. So that looks correct to me, right? We can slide all the way forward and all the way back. I think that's good. And with any OTF, like always, it's gonna be, you want to put these just snug and no tighter. So just like 2 fingers, nice and easy. You don't need to crank it down like crazy. There's no reason for it. It's a 256 screw also, so like it's super fine thread and super small diameter. So the interface there is really small. Just you don't want to strip anything, because then you gotta like drill it out and helicoil it or retap at a bigger size and find compatible screws that might work at a bigger size. You're gonna cause yourself a huge headache doing that. So prefer not to. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think this is a really interesting knife. I really wish they would release another Scarab that's roughly the same size. You know, they got the Scarab 2 now, which is just a monstrosity. I will pull that over in a second once I get these screws in, so you guys can see kind of the side-by-side of the Scarab 2 versus this Scarab. The closest knife size-wise to this Scarab right now that they have is the Cypher 2, I want to say. It is a Cypher. Yeah, Cypher is the right model name. Yeah, I mean, the blade is super similar size. It just doesn't have the inlays, so it's not quite as like either unique or interesting or whatever you want to call it. But here's these two side by side, right? So you can see the massive size difference between these. So I'll try and get them closer. Like that's a huge size difference. And then blade length, like you got here. We'll do that. So you got probably 2/3 of an inch or something like that difference. So I mean, the Scarab 2 is huge. I don't like carrying this thing in my pocket just because it's comically large, right? 5.4 inches, right? So overlaying this guy on it from the same measurement point, it's like that's such a big difference. And then blade length, this guy's 4 inches, I think, on the dot. So pretty sure about that. Let's see. Yeah, about 4 inches on the dot. So I don't know. This for me is way too big. I'm not a big fan of it. I think the DES blade is really cool, but if you scope around online, you can get DES blades for this too. So it'll be, and what that is it's a dual edge blade, so it'll have the sharpened belly and the sharpened spine, but it's in the single edge kind of shape format, we'll call it. So it uses the same blade blank like this, where you get like the benefits of having the belly here and the flat edge and still a higher grind. Then there's a shallower grind on the back end. And like the dual edge serrated or DES with that full serrate on the back end, that can be a really useful knife too, because you don't need a lot of belly when you're using the serrations or a lot of high bevel when you're using serrations. So that I've found really useful just because of the format and everything. So I think I'm going to call it for this video, but thank everybody for tuning in. If you have any other questions, if I missed anything, if you know any information about this otherwise, please feel free to leave it in the comments or let me know. Or if I'm doing something that you don't like, then let me know that too. So thank you very much for watching and have a good one.